watching WCIA 3 News at 6.
For months, it's been unclear just how full courtrooms would be following the end of the state's eviction moratorium. That is, until now.
Tonight, a new Target 3 investigation reveals in the month after it was lifted, landlords filed the most eviction cases in 3 years in at least a few of our largest counties. Our investigative reporter Renee Cooper has been following this story long before it expired. So Renee, tell us, how many people have lost their homes?
Well, the year-and-a-half eviction pause ended exactly 4 months ago. That was on October 3rd. And that month, 87 evictions were filed. That's here. That was in Macon County. And since evictions were paused in 2020, let's focus on the change between 2019 and 2020. That was a 770% increase. Now, in Champaign County, there was a 15% increase between 2019 and 2021. And numbers aside, I took some time to sit in the courtroom to see that impact for myself.
It did surprise me. I thought we'd have a bigger bump. I never thought we'd have the wave that everybody talked about, but I did think we'd have more of a bump.
Champaign County Associate Judge Brett Olmsted says after a surge of filings in October, it was immediately back to the volume you'd see in a pre-pandemic eviction court.
I think what you're seeing is that our local agencies were really active about getting the word out and talking to people and making the most of the rent assistance funds that they had.
So, of the 376 cases filed in Champaign County between October and the end of the year, how many ended in someone losing their housing? Judge Olmsted says at least 50%, likely closer to 70.
I think a lot of people think that if they could only just have a judge listen to their story, they'd be able to avoid eviction. That's not the way the law works.
Here's how it does work. The landlord has to give a written 5-day notice. At that point, the tenant has 5 days to bring rent payments up to date. If that doesn't happen,
that's it. You get an eviction order under the law.
It's a rather quick resolution legally. What gets a little more complicated for the landlords is getting reimbursed for owed rent.
I would say that odds are low. Eviction court is poverty court. If people are being evicted because they haven't paid their rent, it's not because they chose to buy a Ferrari instead. It's because they chose to eat.
When they end up in court, how many of them are dealing with financial hardship?
I would say probably 99.9%.
Rosa Drucker coordinates an eviction mediation program at both the Champaign and Macon County courthouses. We told you about it launching over the summer.
The goal of mediation is not to keep landlords and tenants together. Sometimes the best option for both sides is to find a dignified exit to that relationship and go their separate ways.
Do you feel like it's actually changing outcomes?
Absolutely.
Drucker has mediated 38 cases in Champaign County alone. Many are ongoing, but of the 16 now closed, 5 signed an agreement to move out, 4 created a payment plan to stay, and 7 worked through the rental assistance process. I sat in on a day of eviction hearings myself. With about one exception, hearings were reset to give every renter who was actively applying for help more time to do so.
Mediation has been able to resolve issues and keep people in their homes.
Olmsted encourages landlords to help tenants pursue rent assistance money. He says that might be the only way to get paid. It's also a factor keeping the volume of evictions at bay.
Should there be some sort of permanent rent assistance program, considering evictions are no different than they were in 2019?
I think that's beyond my expertise.
Olmsted did tell me at the forefront of eviction court is a low-income housing problem.
Frontline policymakers need to think about low-income housing and what you're going to do with having an adequate supply of low-income housing, because that supply is dwindling. It's going to become a crisis at some point.
Now, rent assistance programs are also starting to fade away. And is there a possibility renters that are hurting to pay their bills are back near square one? We'll hear from them coming up later in the newscast. In the meantime, you can find a much deeper breakdown of the statistics compiled for this report on our website, including the outcomes from mediation over in Macon County and more advice from the experts. Back to you.
All right, we'll see you in a few minutes.
The news continues here on WCIA 3, your local news leader.
COVID-related rental assistance money is drying up in central Illinois.
We're talking about money from the federal government that's been keeping people in their homes and making sure landlords continue to get paid. Target 3 investigator Renee Cooper back with us tonight. Renee, you told us that money is a part of what's keeping the number of evictions filed in court at bay. So when will it be gone?
Well, Jessica, the applications for the statewide program closed back in December, and in Champaign County, applications close at the end of the day tomorrow. Meanwhile, some renters who were in a bind about a year ago are just getting back on their feet. And as COVID cases spread more quickly than ever, they worry one small setback could send them spiraling back to square one.
I'm a person who's been on my own since I was 18. I always paid my rent.
Like countless others, the pandemic put an end to this Urbana renter's ability to keep up every month. He asked that we leave his full name out of the story to avoid issues with employment. As requested, I'll refer to him as Deshaun.
So I worked at a job for almost 3 years, was furloughed for 3 to 4 months, and we was told we would come back to work after COVID, but then got told that the business closed down.
He says he immediately started looking for a new job. All the while, bills were piling up, especially rent payments.
So even with me putting down $1,000, $1,500, I still was another month and another month behind, literally.
Deshaun says he ended up about $6,000 to $7,000 behind. So, although he found a new job within a few months, he couldn't afford what he owed.
And I'm like, hey, I'm doing what I can do, but it's kind of impossible if I'm paying month by month.
Back in July, he began the rental assistance process through the Illinois Housing Development Authority. After 4 months,
it was very hard to hear from them.
And phone calls to the WCIA Target 3 team to help figure out where his application was at, he was approved in November.
Honestly, that's one thing. It's been really confusing.
Lisa Benson runs the Emergency Rent Assistance Program at the Champaign County Regional Planning Commission. She says because these types of programs were brand new, the infrastructure and staff needed to contact renters and landlords in a timely manner wasn't immediately available.
And I get it. They're stressed. They walk out the door and they want to know 2 days later, well, where does it stand? So we created a timeline, and we give that to every single applicant that comes in and tells them with a specific date, if you haven't heard from somebody by this date, now it's time to give us a call.
RPC has approved more than $7 million in direct rent assistance in the program's 11-month history. The organization seeing, on average, 20 to 30 applications every day. But as of Friday, no more will be accepted because Benson expects there isn't enough money to fund any new applications beyond that day. Meanwhile, people are still getting sick from the virus, keeping them out of work.
I was on the quarantine for 10 days because I was sick. Jobs did not offer any payment. That's not something they do anymore.
He's right. The emergency paid sick leave passed by Congress back in 2020 expired in September, meaning employers don't have to provide COVID-specific sick leave. And because Deshaun's job is not considered full-time, they don't have to offer him any paid time off.
I was already behind. I don't want to keep going behind. So after my quarantine, I've been here pulling like 12-hour shifts.
To answer your question, yes, I do worry about it having an impact on people's income. And that's why we also have our hardship rent assistance.
Something RPC has offered to those living in Champaign County long before the pandemic. Benson says the application takes a little more legwork, but the money continues to be available.
Do you worry about needing rent assistance again?
At the moment, no, but I'm praying not. I'm working on my savings, my budget, but the way COVID cases is going up, you never know.
Deshaun says he's working on getting his CDL license now for added job security.
You don't want to put yourself in a situation where a job has the control of whether you're homeless or not.
And Benson says there's a possibility for another round of federal assistance, but they're waiting for updated guidance from the federal government. The approval process is ongoing, both at the state and RPC, and money is still being dispersed. So there isn't necessarily a reason to worry if you've applied and haven't received it yet. And if you've got something you'd like the Target 3 team to look into, email us at target3@wcia.com. Back to you.
All right. Thank you.